Managing teams is an art, and being able to find the right people who are there for the right reasons changes everything.
Welcome to Lonely at the Top, a podcast for high-level leaders carrying the invisible weight of the world. Because you know the higher you rise, the fewer people you can safely talk to. Here we welcome founders, executives, and decision makers who feel the isolation and pressure that comes with power. Lonely at the Top is your sanctuary in the storm, and I'm your host, soul medic and former psychotherapist Rachel Alexandria. Let's get into our guest today. John Valencia is the president and CEO of Good for Others Foundation, a national leader in workforce development and nonprofit empowerment. With over 2 decades of executive leadership experience, John has raised nearly $1 billion, that's billion with a B, for education and community advancement initiatives. Oh my gosh, John, this is
It's a lot
so
of money.
impressive. It's so much money. That's amazing. And you, for those who can't see and are just listening, you don't know this, but John looks too young to have raised this much money at such a young age.
Listen, I just got a haircut just to cut off the gray, so that's what I got to do.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to have you here. For those who are maybe curious about how we know each other, because on this show, I interview people I know very well, and I interview people I have just met. So John and I actually have known each other for about a year. We met through the fancy social club here in San Diego called the Reading Club, which is really just kind of like a fun salon in the Gertrude Stein style of people who are intellectually curious and socially craving, I guess, to
Good
meet
way
each
to
other.
describe it. Yeah, I love that.
Every once in a while, my MFA in poetry shows up. So yeah, we've known each other for a while, and I just knew I wanted to have you on the show because if anybody understands what it's like to be lonely at the top and to work through that, it's you.
Yes, that's true. Happy to be here.
And you've been at the top in a lot of places for a long time.
Yeah, I have run 5 different nonprofits here in San Diego. I've been a vice chancellor for workforce development for a community college system and vice presidents of different levels or departments within an education institution in LA. So, yeah, it's sometimes you when you get there at the top, it can be very lonely and very isolating.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into it.
Let's do it.
So have you, for most of your career, kind of been in leadership?
Always,
Would you say?
yes. Yeah, I would say even, when I was started my own company when I was, I don't know, 8, selling lollipops up and down the street in my
Oh
little
my
red
gosh.
wagon with my cousin Samantha. Yeah, I've always really loved leadership roles and helping harness the goodness in others to do good work. And that's just been part of my DNA for as long as I can remember.
That's amazing. So do you even know what it's like to be just kind of one of the employees?
It's a good question. I guess that goes to my leadership style as I prefer to be one who is more of a coach and on a team that's doing really good stuff and accomplishing a lot together. So I feel in a lot of ways, whether I've been in a truly authoritative role based on the specific role that I'm in, but yeah, I guess a lot of ways, I think I've probably always just been at some point one of the leaders of a group or an organization for sure.
So you've never really known any other way in some ways. I mean, probably in school you were
Yeah,
not the authority figure and you had to work
yeah,
in groups and stuff.
yeah. I think I mean my first job was I was running a teen center in Santee, and that was I was a part of the team, but also part of the team that created the entire thing. And so
Oh my
that was
gosh.
an interesting role of like reporting to people, but also knowing that I helped create what was running. And again, I
Wow.
think that was a lot of fun, but yeah, I've never really thought about that. I have really been in roles that have had a lot of authority attached to them for sure.
Did you ever feel nervous about that or the pressure of that? Or has it always been natural?
I think there's a natural draw to accomplish and do a lot. That's just innately part of me as a human being is I get satisfaction from checking a lot of things off of a to-do list and setting my own kind of bar pretty high and knowing that that's kind of just my minimum. And I think that setting that bar continually, one, I've learned not to necessarily do that and have boundaries in that same process, but I really love work. I love to work. The work that I do feeds my soul. And so I feel like it's not work at the same time. And so it's become integral in who I am because I just love choosing to do work that feeds my own
Mm.
soul, right? At the same
Mm.
time. So I feel like it's a win-win where I can delve in and do all this extra that I think most people would clock out at 9 to 5 kind of job. And I'm like, nah, I'm okay continuing to do this work because it's meaningful, it's rewarding, and it's something that I'm truly passionate about.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of the time you've created it, so it really is aligned with how you want to make an impact.
Yeah, I think that's. I was just on a staff meeting today, and that was part of the conversation. Was, I sometimes need to be in a room because I may have created something on a whim, and it gets funded or it becomes something, and then people are like, "Wait, is this what's supposed to be?" And I'm always having to remind people like, it was just an idea. It's a start. So you take it where you want to go. I could come in and provide more context to where I was thinking or why, the why behind things, but things evolve. And I want the ownership to not just be from me, but collective voices, because I feel like there's so much more that we can get from different personalities and perspectives and thoughts that make an idea an even better idea. And so I try to make sure that it's infused in all that we do, that it's like, well, let's ask John. No, no, no. I mean, sure, yes, it can provide guidance, but I also want to know from those experts at the table what they're thinking and where things could go. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
It sounds like you're really a visionary, an initiator and a visionary, and probably a rare one because you're one who's not super attached to all of the you're not trying to micromanage your vision. You just have a vision, you get something started, and then you're like, let's collaboratively shape that. I,
Yeah.
I would imagine that's less common.
Eh, I would 100% agree. Finding like-minded individuals with that mindset is rare. I would say, going back to your original question earlier about have I ever been on teams? It's kind of funny you say that because one of my first jobs in college, I worked at Old Navy and I just got to fold clothes and do that. And I remember one of the things that I always said, it was one day you're going to run a business and you're going to do great work. The most important thing I promised myself was I wouldn't micromanage because I hated being micromanaged. And
Yep.
so I think in some ways, sometimes can be my downfall too, is that I do really want to encourage and nurture folks to be independent, to take ideas that I have, these crazy harebrained ideas I have, and create something with that. I have learned also that that is very hard for some folks, right? So there
Mm-hmm.
are people, we've been doing a lot with predictive index and different tools to understand like behavioral assessments of who we are and how we like to work and how we like to be managed. And that's a big thing for me because I realize, I am this maverick, according to the predictive index, that is a visionary, that does love to create and think outside the box and get teams excited about things. But then I can easily get bored with those ideas. And so I know that I can create and design, work backwards from, say, here's the goal. And then here are all the steps we're going to have to do in order to get from A to Z, but work backwards, which I love. But as soon as I start getting too close to that goal where I see it's actually almost there, then I want something new and I need to go and
Mm-hmm.
pivot and find a new project that excites me. And similar takes those experiences and expertise I've now obtained and learned from that project and apply it elsewhere. So yeah, but it's definitely I don't like to be want to be micromanaged, but it is can be very hard to take an idea that is bold and big and creative and weird. And I will definitely say harebrained ideas happen out of my mouth all the time. And I think sometimes my staff are like, no, 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 we're already doing this. I'm like, okay, you asked. Careful what you ask for.
So it
Fun.
sounds like you have to make sure you surround yourself with people who do like executing
Mm-hmm.
and completing and really tying up loose ends of
Yes.
projects.
Yes. Achievers are my make the team great with the John team because we have other Mavericks on our team. We have folks who, when we know that want to see or understand fully the idea before
Mm-hmm.
they can execute. And we've learned now, especially with predictive index, like learning how when someone is innately that type of person, they just want to really understand the why behind it. I don't necessarily need to have a why on why I'll create something crazy and wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also believe that an idea is an idea at a moment, and that is going to evolve. It should evolve and become better and better and better. And so I can help create a baby, but that baby is then going to evolve and create and turn into some magical stuff. But you're going to feed and nurture it along the way. And I don't necessarily desire to feed and nurture it along the way. I want to bring
Mm-hmm.
the teams that can do that. But there are folks who, really want to understand, well, what is at the end? And I'm like, at this
I
moment
don't
today,
know.
this is what I thought. This is what I think. But when things change on a dime, especially nowadays, you really have to be able to pivot and adapt.
Yeah.
And so, that's always really important to have the right people on the team. But, holding each other accountable to those things as well is also fun.
Has that ever been isolating, being such a visionary and people not always being willing? Like, have you encountered that much? People being kind of like, well, wait, but how does that go and how are you going to execute? Because I have a little bit of that myself. There's plenty of times where I've had a vision and I try to get support on it without having a lot of money to just buy the support. And I've experienced other people not understanding a vision. And so I just have to slog through most of the creation before they can actually be like, oh, there's a thing and it's tangible. I've experienced that as isolating. Has that happened to you?
Absolutely. I think that for me, I've been able to lean into some of my strengths. I know that to Strengths Finder and all these things we do in the world, right? One of them is woo. I'm also a really good storyteller, and so
Mm-hmm.
I think that really helps in encapsulating visions or thoughts that I might have to say, oh, okay, sounds like a good idea, but why? And then the storytelling nature in me can come out and help someone understand. And then the woo, I think, is helpful getting them on board. But so often, those are, I guess, maybe coping mechanisms because of it being isolating and not having necessarily always a sounding board who has a similar silly
Viewpoint.
wired mind as I
Yeah.
do. And I always say that sometimes clients hire me for this brain that thinks and can design things very differently than most people can.
So when you say woo, just for the sake of clarity, I know what
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about. You're
Mm-hmm.
not talking about woo woo,
No,
which we
no.
also will reference on
Yes,
this show in different
yes,
episodes. You're
yes.
talking about the Strengths Finder, which
Mm-hmm.
stands for, is it win other people over? Win
Yeah.
others over?
And yeah, the idea of being able to win someone over in a really
Mm-hmm.
authentic way. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not through any sort of manipulation or anything like that, other than you're genuinely can connect with someone
Charismatic.
and be charismatic. That's my other
Yeah. Yeah.
strength finder, right? Of course. And
Yeah.
so I think those things have allowed me to be in the space that I am. But it
Mm-hmm.
can be very isolating when there are folks who don't understand and or sometimes don't want to understand.
Or
And
they're
so
not won over by charisma.
yeah,
They're the ones who are like, well, but I need to see the facts. I need to
yes,
see the data.
right.
I
And I
need a
want to be
50-page business plan.
yes, yes. Well, and to I guess also answer that question, that was probably why a portion of why I'm not in the education system anymore.
Mm.
And not to talk bad about education because I think it's a wonderful sector and doing great work. For me, that was really hard because
Mm,
there are a lot of people in education who don't have or bring innovation
mm,
or change. A lot of people are
mm,
very resistant to change in big bureaucracies. That just happens in any bureaucracy. And education is very much a bureaucracy. And so I think that was
mhm,
also very hard to, Chancellor Miles, Cindy Miles is one of my favorite human beings. And it's because I remember sitting in my interview with her, her in a beautiful, bold, bright yellow blazer and just staring at me. And I was like, I get her. She gets me. I can just tell that we're going to be in that creative wavelength of thinking big, big, audacious goals. And that's exactly what I did. And I was like, okay, I can come here because I'll have you because you need to have
yeah.
this. It's really very lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. Having just even one person at work who thinks similarly
Mm-hmm.
and where you don't feel like I'm a foreign entity here is a
That's
big
right.
deal.
Yeah.
I remember feeling that way at school when I was getting my degree in therapy. I was kind of a weird outlier. I had not been to therapy myself, which years later I realized I just have all these friendships where we have massively deep process oriented conversation. So it's kind of similar. But I was an extrovert and an Enneagram 8, and I did not fit in with all of the much more introverted, tend to be type 4s for those who understand the Enneagram. And I just didn't quite feel like I felt like I belonged, but I
Mm.
also was like, I don't entirely feel understood. So when I'd have a teacher that would really get me, it was so important. I think that is a thing that everybody needs wherever they are. You just need at least one person who really sees you and that it's
Mm.
not just trauma bonding.
Mm. It's so true.
Right.
It's so true.
So, something I know about you that I am curious if this yeah how this might help with your experience of isolation, because like we said, you've been a leader almost your entire career and you're in a nonprofit that you built and that you run, but I also know that you tend to hire friends to work for you.
I do. I do. I think one of the things I've learned, I mean, when I was at the college system, I mean, we had 5,800 employees. At one point, I owned a Christmas light manufacturing company that had lots of people. I've had spaces where I've just had a lot of humans, and managing teams is an art. And being able to find the right people who are there for the right reasons changes everything. And
Mm,
so, what I learned in education was the mission and the values and the why behind what education does is so strong. And there's a lot of people in education who are connected to that vision and that why. And there's a lot who
mm-hmm,
aren't.
mm-hmm,
And that I think it can be hindering when not everyone on the team is aligned for the same goals and mission. And in education, it's really important. It's also equally important in the nonprofit space because we are mission led organizations. And when you can really connect with the mission of the organization you're working at, you are exponentially better. And so
mm-hmm,
when you understand, whether it's helping homeless or housing insecure or environment or things like that or cancer or health related issues, right, and you have a tangible connection to that mission,
mm-hmm,
it changes everything. And if you then
mm-hmm,
also have people who have that but also who you can trust, that I think has been something I have learned in the 20 something years of my career is really investing in humans, building relationships, and especially in the nonprofit space. I mean, all my jobs have all been relationship based, and the success has come from being those or having those really authentic relationships. But when you have to work, get to work with people for a minimum of 40 hours a week, and sometimes it's so much more than that, you really have to trust. And I think that it's been over time where I've hired folks who been friends with or I've worked before. And there's something about that where you spend so much time with these people. Dare you say,
Mm.
we're not allowed to say this, but you love these people. You should, right? You're spending so much time with them. Like they know all about you. You're doing things, right? I love the people I work with. And it's always a no to say that, but I do. And I want to make sure that they're getting what they need out of their career and that job and that role at that moment, and making sure that they feel valued and they feel part of that team. And in the moment where they need something else in their career, I want to be also the first person who can help them and not feel scared or afraid to leave that space. And I
Mm.
feel like that's where, when sometimes I look through the Rolodex of people I've worked with, and the same names sometimes come up because of their experience, because of their dedication. It's hard not to. I mean, I'll still go through interview process and make sure I'm not missing a diamond in the rough that exists. But if I can steal someone away from another organization because I know they're great, um, I look at my team now. I've stolen everyone, um, even from the
Look out,
reading
other
club, right?
organizations in San
Right?
Diego. John's coming for your
Yeah.
people.
Uh, and and I think that also just adds to the trust of
Yeah.
knowing, seeing someone for who they are, seeing them in a role, trusting or enabling them to do something and pivot. And I also believe that people, especially these days, are moving in and out from jobs, and there's no
Mm.
succession planning. And so, in order to grow your salary and your expertise, you end up having to leave organizations and go somewhere else. And sometimes you even go back to that organization before they realize they should have paid you more to do everything in their power to keep you. Right. But there's so much of this now back and forth, and compared to generations before where people stayed in a job for
Right.
their entire career. If I could steal someone to help me do something really great and it's a win-win for them for their career, and they get to come land and stay with me for a year or two or three or however long they want, I just love that. And again, it goes that back
Mm.
to just having that trust, and I guess maybe also helps with that isolation piece to
Mm.
to a degree, right? Because I do know them, they know me, they know my flaws, my strengths, and then we also know that we can jump into a conversation or support a client or solve a problem leaning on our collective strengths and weaknesses together. And that, sometimes when you hire someone new, it takes so long just to get to know that person, let alone them
Right.
understand the organization. And so when you can hire someone or trust or have worked with in the past, most of the time it works out really good.
Well, part of what that tells me, so this is a concept that we learned when I was in grad school, because my schooling was both in systems, like we had organizational development people, and we went through some of the same training as the therapists went through,
Hmm.
and vice versa. Um, we talked about there's two kind of times in any company, in any system, where I don't even know, like call it minor seasons or something like that. And they are called task and maintenance.
Hmm.
It's time for task, like we're doing, everyone's doing jobs, we're having the meetings, we're executing stuff, whatever. And then there's like a rumble in the system. People are rubbing the wrong way, there's miscommunication. It's time for maintenance,
Hmm. I
right?
love that.
Yeah, just like engines, just like a car, just like a house, right? Sometimes it's just doing its job and functioning. And then you have to have moments in time where you do maintenance. So, what it tells me that you've been able to work with people you love. And I know you have a family member in your team. I know you have some of your good friends and people you hang out with
Hmm.
outside of work time.
Yep.
To me, what it says is that you have a lot of skills in doing maintenance
Hmm. Hmm.
and not
That
just
makes a lot of
task.
sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I can concur. I concur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a note. That's just one way leadership can look, is for people who are building their own teams. For some people, it wouldn't work for them
Hmm.
to have friends on. It would just be too much. Let's just call it emotional labor. But I think
Hmm.
you have a lot of ability. You have a lot of skill with emotional labor.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also healthy boundaries and checking those boundaries regularly to make sure that it's healthy for both parties, all parties
Mm.
involved. And I think also making sure that when I'm also hanging out with that friend who may work with me or do something. I mean, so often this happened last night, having dinner, and guess what? You're talking about work. And then we're like, wait, let's not talk about work. And you're like, but we both love it so much. And it's like, okay, just a little, and then we'll get it out of the way, and then we'll just hang out. But I guess again, when it's people who are really passionate about this, I cannot just flip a switch at 5 p.m. and say, I'm now done with work. Like work is me. I am
Mm.
it. And I love that. And I think that
Mm.
that's been, I'm not creating widgets, even though maybe I created a cool widget that I love so much that would be part of me. But that's why I got into the nonprofit space. I've been doing this work that I feel is transformational. And the more work I get to do, only helps more humans, right? Like naming my organization Good for Others was very purposeful because that's exactly what we love to do. And so that extra email before bed or text message or whatever it may be only allows me to realize that it's just continuing the momentum of the work, and the work
Mm.
leads to transforming individual lives and family members of those folks. And that
Mm.
to me is just deeply, deeply satisfying and rewarding. And so I've just guessed over time, maybe we'll talk about that in therapy, but these boundaries of that just to me is like, oh, is this wrong? It's not wrong to me or for me. Right. And at this moment for
Yeah.
me, I love it and it fuels me and it excites me and it allows me to want to wake up in the morning and be invigorated and refreshed to just continue doing that work.
I think for anybody, I'm just going to interject and say for anybody asking the question, because I get this pretty frequently from my clients, a question of, is this the right thing? Or I'm doing this, but is it wrong? And I heard a little echo of that question there. And I would say, because different things work for different people, different strokes for different folks is the saying, right? I would say if it brings you joy more than pain, if it brings you more joy than suffering, it's not the wrong thing. And you just got to watch for the balance and be honest with yourself if it ever flips,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
I mean, a wise person, may or may not be you, once said, what are healthy boundaries? And I was like, what are boundaries? I have no idea. And you're like, well, if you're doing it out of a space of fear, then that's probably not a healthy boundary. And if you're doing
Mm-hmm.
it that brings you joy, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And it really does. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think probably say that so often every day. I'm like, should I be doing this? Yeah, this brings me joy.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to sit here and answer some emails and do this thing and brainstorm a cool new project I'm working on, even though it's after
Mm-hmm.
hours and I shouldn't be doing that? It brings me joy. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to fall asleep with a smile on my face.
Yeah, and joy is very different than relief from guilt.
Mm-hmm.
There is a relief we get when we address something that's making us feel guilty, when we stop having a should and we do the thing, quote, we should. That can bring relief, but it's not the same thing as joy.
Mm-mm.
Joy is a buoyant experience. Like you say, you fall asleep with a smile on your face. Relief from guilt is like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you get a little dopamine from it, right? But
Yeah.
it's not going to feel the same. So,
It's like a band-aid.
right. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
good, it's really important to notice the distinction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's our little therapy moment for the audience today. I want to hear about a leadership decision or season that really tested you.
I have many.
Yeah, in 2 decades. I'm sure you have lots.
All right. I'm going to go where I didn't think I was going to go without naming names.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked somewhere once
Mm.
that I couldn't enter the room as my true authentic self.
Mm.
And in the interview process, I became clearly aware that that was the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to make a decision. Was I going to leave a really amazing job and career and
Mm.
pivot to something that I could also see myself as a potential really cool career avenue that was similar but different. And I took the leap of faith because I saw what I believed or wanted to believe to be super shiny and new and exciting, kind of going back to that idea of
As you said that
needing
you were,
something
yeah.
new,
Uh-huh.
a new baby to birth.
Uh-huh.
And I was really excited about that. And I let that excitement of something new overshadow some very significant red flags in an interview process and in those first 6 months on that job.
Mm.
And I would say that that was something I will always, every day, honestly remember. I think I see it now with oddly some fondness and not sadness, but more of the
Mm.
growth that I have seen myself because of those circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But when again, without getting into too many details, I basically wasn't allowed to be me. I was
Mm-hmm.
married at the time to a man, and that man was not allowed to accompany me to work events. And I was
Mm.
explicitly told that he wouldn't be allowed. And as
Mm.
illegal as horrible as
Blech.
that was, yes.
Yeah.
Also, wanting this job so badly, this title, this coolness of it, I allowed myself to succumb to these authoritarian figures, um,
Mm-hmm.
to acquiesce, to give in, to lean into that shame that I had been trying to pull myself out of, and to throw myself back in the closet for others
Mm.
and not for me.
Yeah. Not good for others
Not
and
good
not
for
good for
others and
you.
not good for John. And
Yeah.
so it was I'll say about a year process for me to get through to say I deserve better. I'm worth more.
Yeah.
And as scary to embark into the unknown, because usually I don't leave a job without having something else lined up.
Mm.
I had to lean into believing in myself and saying, well, you'll find something, but this isn't
Mm.
healthy for you.
Yeah.
And so I would say, it's sometimes really hard to follow something shiny and be blind to red flags and things along the way, and then
Yeah.
find yourself into a situation that you're like, I could have prevented this, but I believed so much, and I was intrigued and curious,
Yeah.
and that can get you into spaces where you're like, But I would say now again, grateful for those things. I couldn't have seen that when it happened, but now I'm like,
Mm.
well, honestly, I kind of see that myself. I would never allow myself to be pushed back in the closet. Never want to be
Good.
with people or clients who don't just value me for the crazy brain that's inside of here, and not allowing me to just be my true authentic self, walking into every single room with my jelly blue colored nail polish, and just knowing like this is me. I'm tired of not being 100% authentically me in every single
Hell yeah.
space, right?
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
Mm.
I think that's going to resonate with pretty much everyone who listens because I think leaders all across the board, whether they're LGBTQIA or a different ethnicity than the dominant paradigm
Yeah,
in this country, or female or
yeah, yeah.
anything, right? Everyone has stuff that they feel like they have to suppress in order to excel.
Imposter syndrome. I mean, you walk into a room and you know, you brought it up earlier. I do look younger than my age, and thankfully for that. But that was really hard in my career when I was first starting. I mean, I literally looked like I was a 12-year-old kid, like at a board meeting on and they would be like, "Is your dad working today?" Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, nope, I'm John, right? And that happened over and over and over through my career, and so I always felt like I had to work harder to earn my keep when I was
Mm-hmm.
in a space. I was youngest vice chancellor in the state of
Mm.
California when I had my job, and that was a risk the chancellor made on me. Thank goodness she did. And but I knew those first not even 3 months, 6 months, maybe even first year I was there, I was going into spaces and having to convince and preach my resume without making it seem like I was doing that, but selling my worth
Mm,
over and over and over.
it's
And to the point where
exhausting.
I find, yes. And I think, at that point, it was this idea of just trying to prove myself and say, like,
Mm,
I knew I earned this seat that I had, but
mm-hmm,
others would just judge a book by its cover and assume that I am
mm.
or who must know someone to get this job. And I was like, actually, let's sit in a room and quiz me.
And you'll
That's
find
what you'll
out.
see, that I know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about and I'm pretty good at it,
Yeah.
without being cocky, but knowing, understanding, like coming
Yeah.
in with that space of like, I can't be overly cocky or confident because it comes off as cocky, right? But this like
Right.
confidence within yourself of being like, okay, if you just take me for what you get and hear me out, and then I
Mm-hmm.
would be able to win people over. But again, leaning on woo and, and with a
Mm-hmm.
charisma in order to be in those
Mm-hmm.
spaces to get to where you go.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. I can only imagine how challenging that must be. Like, I had a tiny bit of that as a younger therapist, right?
Mm.
When I was first starting out in psychotherapy, I was in my late 20s and I read facially relatively young for my age. And yeah, at that point, not a lot of it was hard to find a lot of 20 somethings in
Mm.
therapy, and I wasn't trying to do child psychology. So convincing people who are
Mm.
older than me that I could sit with
Yeah.
them,
What? You're
right?
gonna fix my problems? You're brand
Yeah.
new.
Yeah, you're a brand new baby,
Yeah.
yeah. And I start
Um,
to get it now that I'm older and I try to help other people find referrals and things like that. Or I
mm.
look for a doctor, I'm like, why does everyone look younger than me?
Oh, yeah.
It's freaky. But yeah, I can imagine that must have been just like you have a lot of stamina and determination. A lot of other people would have given up, and
Mm.
you just clearly have so much passion and drive to get through that over and over and over and not become jaded or bitter by it.
I think, yeah, it's about perspective. I mean, I will always be the most optimistic person when I enter a room, and just thinking about meetings I was on before this, and that's what I did. And it's not fake, it's true. I
Mm-hmm.
am definitely being like, okay, okay, this happened. All right, well, this is just more of a challenge or an opportunity to solve a challenge to me, right? And people are like, how do you do that? I'm like, do you really believe that? I'm like, no, I really do. I'm like, all right, like this is
Mm-hmm.
gonna freshen us up and try something new and push us for innovation. I think that's what I love so much. Innovation to me is so exciting with AI and all these things that we're doing right now. It's like
Mm.
exponentially things are happening each day, and I'm here for it. Like, I'm like early adopter, want this because I want to figure out how we can do this and apply that. But when there's people on a team who aren't that way, it can be hard. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's having the right team is really important.
Well, at the top, and this is going to be really interesting because you are such a positive person. So we're going to open your balance sheet of burdens. We're going to look into the private ledger of John
Love it.
Valencia. So we'd love to know, what is one cost you've paid for being in leadership?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, I think the last example is a prime example. I for a long time before I believed fully in my own self worth and committed to myself to be authentically me, there was always a cost that was being paid in order to be in those spaces. So, to not share fully who I love or what I love to do or the things that are excite me or dressing a certain way. I've always had to do that. And it
Mm,
was honestly just in the last probably 5 years where I've
mm,
consciously made that decision where if I want to have joy in my life and I really want to experience it, then I need to be giving myself everything that I can within my scope and my control. And I think
mm-hmm,
that's why running businesses, owning businesses has been so important for me because of the autonomy to not have to wear a suit every day to work, right?
Mm.
Which I did
Mhm.
as a vice chancellor and would push the
Mhm.
envelope to not wear a tie on certain days when I didn't have to, right? Where like there was just so much and not being able to be truly authentically myself for so long. But what I
Mm.
believed, I think, and you can tell me from your therapy view, I felt like I knew I was giving that up
Mm.
because of what I believed and knew in my heart I'd have down the road. And so for
Mm.
me, I believed and knew that this life I have now was going to happen. I didn't know the
Mm.
steps I would get to get there, but I knew I was going to have to work in some jobs and do certain things and in order to get to the point where I feel very lucky and fortunate to be at. But I wouldn't have been able to be here without going through those steps, you
Mhm.
know? And so there's the give and take of what I was willing to do, but there is always
Mhm.
a cost to it. And I got to the point in my career where the cost became too much. And that was
Mhm.
in that role where I was inauthentically myself. And I had to pivot and say, no, 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 no. That's
Yeah.
not happening. I need to invest in me. And that's
Mhm.
the most important part.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the concept of paying your dues, but you have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of decide, are the dues worth it after a certain point?
Yeah.
What is one invisible asset you had, but you didn't maybe realize at the time?
Mm. Ooh, an invisible asset. Great question. I would say that my ability to really connect with someone on like in my world, I'm a connector. It's probably the easiest way to describe what I do. I'll do it for all sorts of different sectors and projects, but I'm a connector. And the way I'm able to do that is by quickly being able to connect with a human in a really meaningful way because I hate when people are fake. I hate when you can see right through the bull, right? And I'm like, no, what are you
Yeah.
here for? And I think that's why in my nonprofit world, I was a really good fundraiser and to raise $1 billion is because if you can really connect with someone about the why, about who you are and what you're doing and what you're selling, and whether it's a widget you're selling. I was manufacturing Christmas lights at one part of my life, right? Because I love Christmas and I love Christmas lights, but I was passionate about it. And so I could go and sell the mom and pop Christmas stores around the United States because I believe. But when you really do, it just becomes a lot easier to build rapport and trust within someone. And so I think it was not until I think later in life where I realized that that true invisible asset was this kindness, this empathy, this realness. And when I was, it was probably when my true authentic self was just starving to be truly itself, could find these humans and could find commonality, could see
Mm.
deeper into someone and understand their why and who they really are, is what drove me to really be able to build relationships with folks. And
Mm.
it has afforded me the amazing life that I have now with bringing the right clients together, bringing the right projects together, being able to open my phone and text someone and literally this just happened, tell them a crazy idea in less than a sentence and they're like, I'm in. And next thing we
Yeah.
know, we're going to start some new cool project together. And
Ah.
again, right, just being able to have that has been a cool asset.
Okay, what is one investment that you're making now for your well being or your soul?
I mean, I think that the best investment I've been making is the many aspects to my mental health journey. I went through a really nasty, horrible divorce um, with, you know, emotional and physical, like domestic violence situation, which was really just horrible. And I think it forced me to put myself in a very vulnerable space to be open
Mm.
to meeting with therapists and multiple ones, right? I've done group therapies, I've done all sorts of really cool spaces to be like, do I like journaling? Do I like meditation? Do I like all these things to try to explore and open myself up to seeing what I connect with the most and financial investment, but it's also mostly been a time investment
Mm.
where I do have to carve out time in my day to invest in conversations, to invest in journaling, music therapy. Like I bought a racehorse to go, and now hang out in the barn and just hang on to them and feel their excitement and love and right, the equestrian world of therapy, and just delving into it and dipping my toes has been really. I knew I needed something right after the divorce. I just really so felt like I really had hit rock bottom and felt so alone. And being able to climb out of that, I think, was the best investment of my life and continue, right? It's a journey that will always be important to me. But the mental health, I think I always said, oh, yeah, of course, everyone should have a therapist. Everyone should do this. Like, but really
Everyone
being able
should,
to
yeah.
invest into finding the right one. And I mean, I've had, I don't know, 4 or 5 therapists in the last 5 years or so. And finding that connection with someone is so important. And then you feel like, oh, it didn't really work out with that one. But then you feel like, I don't really want to hang out with that person anymore. And then I got to go find another one. Should I just stick with this one? And you do that. And then finally you find someone or a team who really understands you. And that I think has been the coolest investment for myself is understanding that it's not just solving something that you might be having or experiencing now, but it's repaving the future that is more aligned to who you are as a human being and who you want to be. And that is the exciting piece too. It's like, yeah, I feel better when it happens, but I'm also realizing that it's only making my future even better.
I love that. Repaving for the future. That's such a great way of describing and such a good pitch for mental wellness work.
Mm.
What do you wish more leaders felt permission to say out loud?
I'm the type of leader who typically wears my heart on my sleeve. And I think it's really hard for some leaders to admit when they're wrong. I think we are held to this standard of
Mm, yeah.
we're supposed to know everything and we're supposed to be guiding and leading and we can't make mistakes. I feel, again, when I can lean into being my truly authentic self, a part of me is this very vulnerable, very raw, and loving, and open to just trying and exploring and messing up. I would say that's one thing I've always not been afraid of is failing. Everyone said, oh, you have a fear of failure. I'm like, no, I learned I have a fear of success. I don't mind failing. I have the fear of doing too good and having, but when it comes to that, I think you really need to allow yourself to play in a sandbox and understand that not everything's going to work out. And if you are open and transparent with your team and your staff um, and knowing like, hey, we're playing in the sandbox right here. We don't know all the answers, but we are going to take best practices. We're going to use our experiences and our expertise to make good decisions. Then you can't be faulted for that. But what you can be faulted is if you fail and you don't pivot. So, and
Yeah.
being able to
Yeah.
notice when you're veering somewhere it's not going where you want and being able to quickly pivot, but by taking that experience and saying, great, we're going to be able to go to plan B because that makes more sense for us. Really admired working with Chancellor Cindy Miles because she would allow me to play in that sandbox and she
Mm,
would allow me to play. Let's try it. Um,
mm,
when your workforce development board, who gives us a lot of support for the work that we do, but their funding that they give us is different than most funding that you would get to a nonprofit because usually you're, yes, it's very structured. Don't get me wrong with that, but they allow us to play in trial and error. And they'll say, oh, we think that we can support people this way. Let's provide these services. And then when you realize, oh, wait, no, they actually have needs here. Oh, we're going to pivot. That is really cool where you can just be in that space. And so, yeah, I would say it comes down to just being vulnerable and not afraid to get messy because life is messy and work is messy, and we can't pretend that that sometimes isn't,
Yeah.
but we can be prepared and aligned to the same goals. And hey,
Yeah.
that's where innovation can come from. That's where you might stumble upon something where you might tweak this and it does something, but it opens a whole new thing. That's really exciting space to be in.
This, you
And
can
so,
really see your visionariness in this. I love it. And before we get to our last question, and we have to wrap up this interview
oh,
soon,
yeah.
but do you want to say just a moment what Good for Others does in case people want, like what they do and how
Yeah.
people might be able to support them or benefit from them?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Good for Others Foundation, we're a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, been around since 2021. And so we're fairly new, but what we wanted was to create an organization that wasn't duplicating efforts in the nonprofit space. So just in San Diego alone, there's 13,000 nonprofits. It's a lot. And so we didn't want to be just this new thing that was taking over and taking funding from other resources that could be going to good work. So what we really found ourselves is to be a workforce intermediary. So we create and bring organizations together to do really good work. And we're doing that right now here in the nonprofit space of bringing all nonprofit CEOs together, bringing all HR folks together, bringing all programmatic staff together where we can come in and actually start solving problems. Right now with the federal funding that's being slashed, right now more than ever is when we need to really coalesce and bring together those doing good work and share best practices and not have to reinvent any wheel. So that's what we're doing. We're building really cool collaborations with this consortium of these nonprofit executives and all levels, and saying this is the work we're doing, this is what we want to do. And we realize that we also need to train folks to do that. So we have a training program to get people into nonprofit work. So if you're interested, go to our website, find out what training programs we have. And on the other side is it's just really motivating and lifting up the nonprofit space for all the good work we do. And so also
Mm.
piece to what we do is amplify really cool programs doing really cool work, but also making sure we have the right workers in these roles, because now more than ever, we need good leadership, people who are willing to be
Mm.
thoughtful with open mind, open heart, and excited about the future. How crazy it is at the moment.
So if people want to find out more about
Yeah.
Good for Others, what's the website they
Oh,
should go
yes.
to?
Go to goodforothers.org and learn about all of our programs and get involved. We're always wanting to hear about projects that people have. If you have ideas, if you want to support us with a donation, we're happy to obviously take any sort of generosity the community has. It is expensive to do this work, and so to train people and get
Mm.
them excited does come with funding needs. And so we're lucky to have a lot of really great partners, especially the state of California, to help us do work, but always wanting to expand and do new things. So check out our website. Yeah, goodforothers.org.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I really want to make sure your organization gets every extra bit of support it can.
Love it. Thank you.
So let's go to our last question, which is the time machine question. It is
Mm.
opening up the doors of the time machine, and you get to step in and go back to a point in your life previously to give a needed piece of advice or support to a past version of yourself. What would you go back in a time machine to say to yourself?
I would go back to 6-year-old John. It's my favorite version of me. He didn't used to be, but he is now.
Mm.
And I would actually bring him a picture of me today. And I would just bring him a picture of me smiling, happy, with my painted nails on. Just hug him and thank him and let him know that, you know, might be surviving at the moment, but
Mm.
to know that eventually he'll be thriving. And
Mm.
the if he can really lean into himself and do the things that bring him joy early and follow those little nuggets, because if I look back in now and I think about it, it was the joy of those little breadcrumbs along the way that have led me here. I think I'm such a person that loves plans and to-do lists, and I think 6-year-old John would just love to know that, like, to be able to see that there's hope and excitement
There's hope
down
in the
there.
future. Yeah.
I think because you know me, I don't want to necessarily know the plan because I want to be able to pivot along
Yeah.
the way, but to know that the end goal is really cool.
Yeah.
That would be something that I would love to have gone back and just tell 6-year-old John without spoilers. I don't want the spoilers, but just a little
You
bit
just
of
want to
him
know it's
just
going
to
to be
know that he's
okay.
going to be okay. Because there
Yeah.
were moments where he definitely didn't believe that. And so I think the just knowing that we're going to be into a point where we're thriving, and that the hiding in plain sight piece doesn't have to be there for so long.
Yeah.
It would be really nice for him to know that.
Well, we'll just say that that happened on the metaphysical level,
Love it.
and it's been great. Such a great conversation. I think there's so much here that we're going to be able to share with listeners, and I look forward to hearing the comments when we debut the show. Thanks so much for being with us today, John.
Oh, thank you for having me here, but also just being in my orbit. I'm grateful for you in my orbit.
Oh, thank you so much. The feeling is mutual.
Oh,
Ah,
I wish we were in person. We'd be hugging right now.
we've been hugging. We'll do
All right,
that
virtual
soon.
hugs,
We'll do it
virtual
soon.
hugs.
Yes. Thanks everyone for listening to Lonely at the Top. If today's conversation resonated, I hope you'll take a moment, give yourself a pause, and check in with what you might be carrying silently. You don't have to hold it all alone. If you're feeling like you're ready for some more support in your leadership journey, if you'd like to let go of some of the lone wolf, you can reach out to me and we can have a chat at rachelalexandria.com. If you know another leader who would really love this show, please forward it to them. Because yeah, it's lonely at the top, but it doesn't have to stay that way.